our board, this feels a little lost to me.
Meeting, I was worried about people saying.
It does.
I don't know, a lot of things we put on.
But a little, I emailed the coach right away, CC.
So what time is it? Do we have
Just
time
said
to do
thank
this?
you for everything you did,
Eeh.
great experience.
Probably most everything tonight.
Replied and he said, I'm not,
Yeah.
Because of the
Yeah, they don't worry about it tonight.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
but they welcomed her and
It only takes a second, but I just, it only takes a second. I just,
That's about all you have.
uh-huh. I don't have my mouse, which is frustrating.
Not used to just having the small iPad in front of me,
Right.
That's Kathy.
a laptop.
Yes.
She's hiding.
So let's see, maybe it'll take longer. I mean, you're not, oh yeah, there you are. So you do have a login, you just didn't know it.
Well,
Because you had one.
hey, this is on the mic.
Come
Come on, they can hear all this.
So, it's
They're
N.A.
picking up.
Reinick and put
Yeah.
in a password.
I'll try.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
Otherwise,
see.
we'll
I'll
just
come up
put in
with
a new
something.
one.
Yeah, otherwise we'll figure it out later.
Because you're an administrator.
We should break
It sounds, it feels a
But they
little
don't
ostentatious.
ever look at it.
Right.
A little distant.
Look at that guess.
You got it? Look at you.
Second try.
Right. This doesn't want to stay on half the time.
Yeah.
You can hear it, Kathy.
Ready?
Ready? I've got 7.
7 o'clock, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Invite everyone to please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kathy, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Jim Dombeck,
Here?
Steve Nelson,
Here?
Kristen Wren,
Here.
James Shiloh,
Here.
Julian Davy,
Here.
Jeff Jacobson,
Here.
Eric Jones,
Present.
a quorum's present.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda as proposed? Got to look around, everybody's so far away. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as proposed?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Before we go any farther, I would like to welcome our new superintendent. It's hard to believe this is your first meeting. I feel like you've already been through the mill. It's been a rough onboarding for you.
Well, it has been complicated, but it's gone well because of the transition planning with the staff, with Mrs. Countryman, and Chris and I were talking before the board meeting. It's all either uphill from here or downhill from here. We'll find out, but thank you, and it's good to be here.
Well, welcome. We look forward to working with you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as proposed?
So moved?
Second?
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Davy,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yep.
Wren. Yes. Shiloh,
Yes.
Dombeck,
Yes.
motion carried.
Thank you. Audience to visitors, is there anyone in the audience this evening who would like to address the board? Nobody? Okay. All right, we'll move on then to communications, correspondence, informational items. We just welcomed our new superintendent, and now we're going to say goodbye to our retiring superintendent. We didn't really have a chance to do that when we were meeting virtually. We didn't feel like it was appropriate to try to do something over computer screens, so we wanted to do something in person. And we wanted to say thank you to Mrs. Countryman for all of her years of service to the district, her years of service to the community, to to countless numbers of people that she's touched over the years, be they students or staff or faculty, board members as well. We're not immune from your influence, and we wish to thank you for all of your service, and we wish you the best and brightest of futures as you go forward. But before you go, we wanted to present you with something to remember us by. So if you would come forward.
Well, thank you. Should I try it out? Yeah, I think you should.
You promised me it would be here, and there it is.
Yeah, well, awesome. This is awesome. Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. I can't. I was gonna say that's.
Can we at least do
so
this?
Yes, thank you.
It's so weird.
Yeah, it is. It's a strange way to leave. I know. Jim spoke a little bit about all of our virtual meetings.
If you'd like to address us, just step right up
Sorry.
to the podium.
Yeah.
I'm reluctant to let you have that.
I was going to say, it's been,
One more time.
20 days without being in front of you. I think giving me the mic might be dangerous, but I know you have a lot of work to do this evening. So thank you very much for the gift. That's very thoughtful. In all of our virtual meetings, I know we didn't have an opportunity to really talk much about how the transition was going, but I've had lots of time to speak with Steve, and I know that this board and this community and our students and our staff are used to doing hard work. And I think you have some really hard work ahead of you, but I know you'll be very successful because of all the intentional planning that you do and always keeping students and families in the forefront when you're making decisions. So it's been a privilege and an honor for me to spend 20 years with you. And so now I'm going to go sit in this chair. My own kids have a bet that retirement won't suit me by October 1st. I'll be seeking employment. And I said, no, I'm trying to prove them wrong. So now I'll take the chair home, and that'll help prove them wrong. Luckily, it rocks, so I won't be sitting too still. But, really, thank you to all of you. You will be incredible together, and I look forward to, as we have grandkids here in the district, to participating as a community member now. And as I've told you guys, and we tell our new teachers, they don't work for the school district, they work for the community of Sycamore. So, be mindful of that as you move forward. And, we have an incredible staff and incredible kids, and thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks.
You were a little suspicious. I asked you to come on. Careful now, careful.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was a long way around there. 20 years, that's hard to believe. I remember when she was the new kid on the block, so time has gone by quickly. Newsletters, comments, questions, concerns? FOIA requests, we have one. It's been responded to. Committee reports.
There's been no planning and zoning meeting for the last 2 months, and I was out of town yesterday, so I was not able to be at the SEF meeting, but maybe Mr. Wilder could give us a quick update on SEF.
I was a couple minutes late, still trying to find my way around the community, but I did make it to the SEF meeting. They did elect officers. They're still looking for a treasurer, so if you're interested.
Board member representative can't be an officer.
That's right.
They looked at me and I said the same thing about the superintendent, so it's scot-free. They did elect new officers. They did bring 5 new board members on and went over the budget. It's going to be a little rough budget for the Education Foundation this year, just because of everything that's happened with the pandemic, and, you know, Lauren expects donations to be down just a little bit, but has a good plan to continue to seek donations. One of the things that they're still planning for is the Take Root fundraiser, to do that virtually, so that we talked about that as well. But overall, it was a really good meeting.
Good.
The old North Grove School, I think I mentioned this the last meeting, they want to do some repair on windows. They did, they're in the process of writing a grant. Actually, by now, it's probably finished. And I do have copies of the proposed grant with some, some of the corrections and so on, so it's not exact. But if, Nicole or Jim, Steve, I have 3 copies. If you're interested, just to see what their plan is, they're really not asking us for anything, so I think that's the key. So if they get the grant, that'll all be taken care of. So if you're interested, I did bring paper copies.
Yeah, I'd like a copy.
So they're not going to proceed if they don't receive this grant money?
No, I'm sure they'll maybe come to us, but I think, Nicole, you sent.
Or other sources?
Yeah, they may
Yeah.
go for other sources.
Yeah, they've been very good about raising funds for every project they want to do. So,
And they are, Jim, going to use the same glass if at all possible, and Dick Snow has that glass if
Yes.
they need it, so.
Yep. Yeah, they took great pains, no pun intended, to make sure that they got the old style glass for the windows, so it's good to know that they're going to keep that. Other committee reports? Since our last meeting, I was able to attend a virtual meeting of the Illinois Department of Public Health in ISB, which was just a treat. They discussed basically their 60-page document of starting the 2020-21 school year. You probably have all read it by now, and it's rather loose in its guidance. It doesn't really give us a really straightforward format, but it does give us some guidance. And they've also said, I've heard recently that they're going to release even newer guidelines in a few days. So stay tuned, I guess. Also was able to attend a virtual meeting with the Illinois Association of School Boards, where they went over the newest policy packet, actually, which we'll be doing as a policy committee on Friday. So that was actually a very enlightening and interesting meeting, because they went through policy by policy and kind of highlighted for the audience exactly what changes were in there, which makes it a little bit easier than having to pick them all out yourself. So, any other committee reports? Superintendent's report.
Well, as you can imagine, there was a lot of work over the last couple of weeks on the return to learning plan. Had several meetings with staff, but we've also gathered input from a variety of stakeholders. I don't want to steal the thunder. Dr. Webster's going to present that plan a little bit later. I'll have a little bit more information to provide as an introduction, but that's really been the focus is trying to figure out the best way to start school in the fall. So I'll let Dr. Webster talk about that here in a little bit. But that's it.
Okay, well, next item on the agenda then is Basics DeKalb County. Hello. Welcome.
I'm not sure if I'm going to feel like I'm yelling or if I'm muffled, so please tell me if my volume is off with this, okay? So I love that you put me right before your return to learn plan. I'm going to pretend that everyone is here to see me. But I do want to say I really appreciate putting us on the agenda. I was supposed to be here with Courtney Hill also, who is our coordinator for
Do you want to tell everybody who you are so they know?
Oh, I forgot, yeah.
It's not often we have a celebrity in our presence.
I'm Amanda Christensen, and I'm Regional Superintendent of Schools for DeKalb County, and I'm very pleased to be here tonight. I was supposed to be here with Courtney Hill, who is our coordinator for Basics DeKalb County. She was unable to make it, though. Normally, she and I do this in tandem, and I have to cover her parts as well. So I'm going to strongly recommend that you do take down her email address at the end of the presentation if there are questions I cannot answer, or if you just want her charisma rather than me, okay? So I'm here to talk to you tonight about Basics DeKalb County. As we know, learning is a continuum, and learning doesn't start when they walk into your kindergarten classroom. Learning begins at day one. There were probably children that were born in DeKalb County today, and so there is a certain moral urgency to give them the absolute best learning opportunities as quickly as possible. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about a way that we can do that. So before I begin, though, on basics in particular, there's a little bit of history that there's been a kindergarten readiness collaborative already working for you. It consists of our DeKalb County Mental Health Board, our DeKalb County Health Department, 4C, the DeKalb ROE, NIU was involved, DeKalb County Community Foundation. We've had other community members, retired educators, and we've had the Kindergarten Readiness Collaborative running really since 2016. It began, though, with a collective impact study that DeKalb County Community Foundation engaged in 2014. And when they surveyed the entire county community, they found out that the two main priorities that DeKalb County residents cared about were economics and education, particularly early education. And so that began a series of events with NIU being commissioned to do really a state of the kindergartner in DeKalb County, a complete study. They also ran focus groups in order to really listen to what did kindergarten teachers say their kids needed, and what were their kids coming to them with deficits in. And so we listened. And one of the main things we heard was that, yes, kindergartners were coming not as ready as they could be. And we also heard that there was this huge gulf, this gap of communication and collaboration between our early learning world, our learning centers, and our K12 world. That's when DeKalb County Community Foundation came knocking on my door and said, we really need to bridge this gap. We need to create alignment between our early learning world and our K12 world, and you as a person and you as an organization, you're already in both worlds. Help us bridge this. So, the Kindergarten Readiness Collaborative said that kindergarten readiness is defined as students' preparedness for school and life success. But what we also said as our vision statement is all DeKalb County children should have equitable opportunities to be prepared for school and life success. And that is our job as part of the community to create those equitable opportunities. A few key data points that came from the study from NIU, you can see there. And this study actually sits on our webpage as well as DeKalb County Community Foundation webpage. So you can go and see what do we really mean by increase, right? Over how many years, how much increase. I'm just providing kind of the sound bites for you to pique your interest. But what we saw, really, the big picture, was that we as a community, we were not doing enough to properly support and nurture our children from birth through age 5 before they ever walk into a kindergarten classroom. So, you may ask, so what's basics? And why the basics? And I'll tell you first, Basics DeKalb County began as Boston Basics. It came out of the Achievement Gap Institute at Harvard University. Dr. Ron Ferguson is the founder of Basics and was also did all of the research behind what the basics are and why they matter to the brains of our little children. We brought Dr. Ferguson here to our community in 2018, and he spoke to 80 to 100 early educators. So our learning centers, our growing place, our pre-Ks, our kindergarten teachers. He came and spoke and explained what the basics were and why they mattered. And our early learning folks said, well, of course, we know this. Now it's your job, ROE, and the rest of the collaborative to go tell the rest of our county with a common message that is easily digestible, easy to understand, easy to implement. You go and do that, because we already knew this. We've been knowing it for years, but no one was listening to us. So please go and be the voice for us as early educators. And we said, okay. So one of the things that is particularly important about brain development is that 80% of brain growth happens in the first 3 years of life. If we think about that, the next slide, if you see, it's a stylized graph here, but you will see a 2-year-old's brain in terms of neurons and synapses is more like an adult brain than it is a newborn brain. And so we have a critical time period from birth to age 3 to do as much as we can for these little brains to better prepare them for you when they do walk into your classrooms. We in education are accustomed to the term achievement gaps, right? Where are your achievement gaps? Which groups are outperforming other groups? But we at the ROE call them opportunity gaps. And what you can see on here, and you can see the source too if you choose to go look at it, is that these opportunity gaps are beginning as early as the age of 2. And then, of course, if you don't address a gap, what happens? They widen over time. And now our students are labeled as having this achievement gap, falling behind, being behind grade level, and with really devastating impact by the time youth graduate from high school, if they graduate. You'll also see that, so first of all, I do have a disclaimer on this slide. I'm using the terms that came from the researchers. We do not typically use the term poor to talk about families from low-income households, but this study did, okay? So that's where we see poor, near poor, and then moderate or high income. And you can see that the percentage of children living in low-income households who are ready for school at age 5 is lower than those who are moderate or high income. So we know that these opportunity gaps are there, and they persist into achievement gaps as they age and then into adult life. So why do I need to talk to K12 education? Because these impacts then accumulate over time. So here's another study that's been provided, and it's the probability of mastering your skills by 5th grade if the child is deemed not kindergarten ready. Now, I will tell you that this study was probably using different metrics of ready than our current measurement in Illinois, okay? So I fully admit that, okay? But this particular study, using their metrics at least, showed that children who were not prepared for kindergarten were less likely to master basic skills by 5th grade, because that accumulates. So why does it matter? Well, there's a list here, and they're all backed by research. Anything from your dropout rate, your suspension rate. There are added expenses, even in the juvenile delinquency system, and it traces back all the way to kindergarten in some studies. So let's talk about you as a community. So every year, kids is given by, well, it's not given. Let me rephrase that. Kids is observational data that kindergarten teachers collect within the first 40 days of school. And we do it statewide. So we have statewide data. But then we also have our district data, and then teachers themselves can break it down into their classroom and then individual students. And that's where the real power of this data is, because that really can inform their instruction as kindergarten teachers. But what we use it for in aggregate form like this, because this is the public data, I can't share individual classroom data, of course. So what we look at is, I look at this as a report card for us as a community. So what are we doing in the first 5 years of life before that child ever walks into a kindergarten classroom to give them a nurturing and learning environment? So you can see all the districts. There are 3 developmental areas: social and emotional development, language and literacy development, and math. And you can see where Sycamore is. It's really important, and I can't stress this enough. It's really important that we do not view this data as an indictment on our elementary schools. And it certainly is not a performance evaluation of our kindergarten teachers. They've got them for 40 days. We as a community had them for 5 years. So what are we doing? But I do think it's really important to analyze your data as a district and be able to look at where are we in comparison to other districts. Maybe that matters. Where are we in comparison to the state? And where are we weakest? We've got 51% ready in social emotional, 49% in language literacy, 36% in math. That gives us somewhere to start, in that maybe we can work with our preschools to work more on math. Kindergarten teachers were saying all along, we need more social emotional skills when they come to us. I can teach them the other things that kindergarten demands. I need them to be able to self-regulate. I need them to be able to cooperate and get along with others and respect space, things like that. So, basics. I'm going to recommend that you go to the website in order to view the videos regarding basics. They're very well done. They warm my heart every time I watch them. So I recommend that you do that on your own. I'm not going to show it tonight. But what are the basics? They're essentially 5 fun, simple, and powerful ways to give every child a great start in life. Oh, that's easy enough. Boom. Like magic, right? The 5 basics, though, I'll put up here. And you may wonder, so why is this really relevant right now? We've got a lot going on, Ms. Christensen. We've got COVID to worry about, and we've got reopening of schools to worry about. And why does this matter? Well, if you take a look at the first one, which is to teach our parents and caregivers to maximize love and manage stress, It is absolutely critical every single day of that child's life that that is what their caregiver is doing, is maximizing love and managing stress. We know what stress can do to us. We know that it can create turmoil. We know that we do not react always appropriately if we are not regulating our stress. Children feel that, and they learn very early, and it actually negatively impedes their brain development. The other basics are talk, sing, and point, count, group, and compare, explore through movement and play, and read and discuss. Now, it may seem like, of course, we're supposed to talk and sing to children, right? But there's actually brain research that has been done that it's really important that not only when we're talking with children and we're singing to them, we're also pointing to the objects we're talking about or the words in the book. So that's why that point part is included in that. Count, group, and compare. Our brains are wired for math. You may think you're not a math person, but our brains are wired for math. Children at a very young age can start to see comparisons of size. They can start to understand, physics. They can start to understand a lot of math concepts at a very young age. And then, of course, the others, explore through movement and play. Please, let's not make play a four-letter word. Our children should be playing to learn. And then lastly, not only read, but also discuss. Again, brain research. We've all been told as parents, we should read to our children. It's the discuss part that wasn't backed by research previously. You should discuss the stories with them. So those are the 5 basics. This is not just for parents and caregivers, though. Our goal as Basics DeKalb County is to saturate the community, because every single one of us as an adult, we have a responsibility in our village to help support and nurture our children. And so that caregiver and that child, they exist kind of there in that center. And we as a community, we support that caregiver as that child's first and most important teacher, long before they are ever with a teacher here in our school district. Schools are up there. They have a role in terms of helping to develop and align pre-K to K, even earlier learning up through our school districts. And then you can see all the rest of the socio-ecological web there. So what do? We work through existing organizations. You'll see a picture here. This is the Basics wall at the DeKalb County Health Department, so that every family that comes in can play with those manipulatives there, and then all the basics are explained. This not only resides at the DeKalb County Health Department, it was also funded by Northwestern Medicine. And so we are working and building our partnerships across the community so that our common message is the basics everywhere you go. It reinforces, it supports, and it allows for that common language in order to fully develop those brains. There's also a public library event. This actually is an old slide now, and so we have a lot more partners by now, but this just gives you a taste of some of our partner organizations who believe in the basics and support the work. We also do community outreach. This again is an older slide. This is a snapshot of 2019. I've given you all our impact report from 2019, so you can see where we went, what we did, and how many families we attempted to impact. That's how many events, that's how many adults, that's how many children. At this point, our evaluation of basics is really based on number of events, are we saturating, and are we measuring awareness? We're not far enough into this yet to be able to measure the impact on children, but we want to stay with this long enough and fund it for long enough so that we can show what we do in basics does impact and we start to see a change in numbers for your kindergarten readiness percentages. So how can you be part of this movement? This is what we make it here in our community. Boston Basics has become Basics Inc. Yes, we are connected to them in a network, but what we do here is up to us. The power is us as a community building this and growing it and taking care of our littlest and most vulnerable. So these are some ideas on how you can support us. We are here to ask for a partner pledge, which should have been included in your board packet. I believe Courtney sent it to you. If you didn't get a partner pledge, please reach out to me and we'll make sure you can review that. None of it is legally binding. It's pretty much just an agreement, though, that we share the philosophical mindset that education begins at day one, it begins at birth, and that we all have a collective responsibility to every child to help them grow and learn. You can certainly go to our Facebook page. That's where we push out a lot of our information. Diaper distributions, tips on basics learning, tips for parents and caregivers on how to align to the basics. You can visit the website. Please learn the basics. And we've had a little bit of a hiatus, like the rest of the world, over the last few months. So we have not had a Basics Ambassador meeting recently. And if we can't meet in person soon, we're going to do it virtually because we need to keep the momentum going. And I will take any questions. And if I can't answer it, then I'm going to warn Courtney that she's going to get them later. And yes, her email really is chill@dekalbcounty.org, because we're that cool. What questions do you have for me?
Well, I did want to say, first and foremost, for people especially in the audience or for you who are presenting, we have a monitor here. So if you don't see us turning around and craning our necks to look at the screen behind us, it's because we are seeing it. It's just on the screen in front of us. So I just thought maybe that seemed incredibly rude to people who didn't know that. So you can't see the screen, but it's definitely there, and it shows all the slides. So the question I have, though, is Indian Creek seems to be knocking it out of the ballpark. And so I was wondering if you have identified some of the factors that have made their numbers look so good that maybe we could study up on.
Right. So there's two things there. The first thing is, and this is not to undermine those numbers at all, the first thing we have to do as a county of educators, though, is make sure we have inter-rater reliability. Everyone was trained at different times. Some piloted it, some came in later. And actually, one of the events we had planned for this fall was to bring all of our K teachers together again and make sure that we are being consistent in our observational data that we record. So that's the first piece, okay? The second piece is, so if we can get past that first, and we're like, yeah, we're all recording pretty consistently here, then we can move to the next question of what is Indian Creek doing in their community that is really bumping up those numbers. Yep. So we range from 7% ready in all areas in Hiawatha to 73% ready at Indian Creek. So we have to look at how are we recording the data, and then we really have to look at, do we have childcare deserts? Does nutrition play a factor? Are there enough childcare facilities? Does health issues matter? Are there, is there a different culture in one community versus another? Then we can get into fascinating stuff. Yeah.
So really, in its infancy, this is going to really help us gather information to differentiate our county from other counties, but also our different areas within the county and within the state, because we go beyond the county here.
Yes.
based on the data that we'll collect, and then so we can deal with our own unique circumstances once we know what we're up against.
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly how it should be used. And we want it to be used. McCormick, I should have mentioned, McCormick Foundation was a huge funder of making kids, that particular tool, a reality. McCormick Foundation also funds basics. They are and McCormick Foundation, by the way, normally funds Chicago area projects.
Right.
But they believe so strongly in the work we are doing here that they are our primary funder right now, in addition to the DeKalb County Community Foundation. So we're able to use them too and their resources to help us really dig into that data.
Great. Other questions?
Amanda, I have one for you, and I can't see you, but my hand is over here. I feel guilty doing this because I feel like I'm really leading the witness here, but given the upcoming conversation we're going to have right after this, I wondered if you might speculate on what you think the impact to kindergarten readiness might be, given the current situation that we are facing as a community and indeed as a globe, as it relates to the additional burdens that are going to be placed on adults and daycare centers as they have to deal perhaps with having older students at home that they now have to care for as well, and maybe just taking some of that attention away from the 0 to 5-year-olds. What message could you send to parents and to educators that might help us through that?
Well, I don't know if I have words of wisdom. I do know, though, that, I've already been involved in several statewide conferences and networking events since COVID hit and, our world changed in March. And we do all agree that there has been a truncated pre-K experience for many of our students who were in a formal, early learning setting. So we know that. Child care centers got shut down. Now, in terms of making a statement on whether it's better to be in a child care setting or better to be at home, I don't want to make that judgment because it's so family dependent. I think what we do have to be aware of, though, is that our little children have felt effects, whether it's been stress, whether it's been away from their formal child care setting, whether someone in their home has been sick, they've been isolated from family members that they love and that they were used to holding and, or being held and hugging all the time. So I think we have, as the adults and as the caregivers, have to be very conscious of what their social emotional needs are. Our kindergarten teachers, or our kindergarten students coming in, they're not going to be your, quote, normal kindergartner coming in this year. And I've talked to several kindergarten teachers already of strategies they're thinking of putting into place in order to more quickly build these relationships, because kids have gone potentially for several months without the normal socializing that they would have gotten. So I think that's what we have to be most cognizant of. And our parents really need to talk up how whatever school looks like, remote, in school, hybrid, our parents really need to support a positive attitude with whatever it is, because we don't want to kill the joy of kindergarten, however it looks. So that would be my main message to parents is, with kids coming back, we just need to be very sensitive that they've probably picked up more to what's going on in our world than we originally thought about.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda then is Return to Learn update.
I'm going to make just a couple of comments and then turn the microphone over to Dr. Webster. As I mentioned earlier, it's been a lot of work to get to this point, and it's not just work that I've done, it's work that's been ongoing for several months with the staff. I've been fortunate to be involved in that, but it's been a long time. There's work that gets done, and then there's kind of a wait for information, and there's more work that gets done, and it's been disruptive, but I really want to start by thanking the staff over the last couple of weeks for the work that they've done collaboratively. It's not been easy. It's been challenging. We've had to be flexible and really kind of be inventive. I'm going to say thinking outside of the box, but not necessarily. When I think about thinking outside of the box, sometimes I think about being creative and thinking of ideas that we've not thought of before. When I refer to thinking outside of the box now, I think of just having to be flexible and in some ways that we've never been before. I want to make sure that the board knows, as well as the community and everybody listening, we have weighed input from the staff, the students, and the community. We've done that at different times, and we've tried to match that feedback as best we can, but we've taken all of that into account over the last couple of months. There were several areas where we had questions and there just wasn't any right answer. A question would come up and clearly there was no direction in terms of this is what we need to do. It's clear cut, it's easy, it's black and white. A lot of areas where that did not happen. So one of the things that I did upon starting on July 1st was just assume the responsibility of giving the staff direction to make some of those decisions. So the plan is really the work of a collective team, but there were areas that I gave that team direction to finalize the plan to get it where it is tonight. The plan, in my opinion, reflects the best effort to provide the best educational opportunities for students in the safest environment possible. I would love to tell you that it's going to be a safe environment every minute, every day, all the time. But as we talked about before the meeting, there are a lot of moving parts here. But we've done a lot of work to try to create a situation where the students and the staff are going to be safe as much as is humanly possible. There are a couple of important points that I want to just kind of lay out there for everybody because these were kind of foundational to our plan. We are going to follow CDC guidance as well as guidance from the IDPH and ISB, which kind of Jim referenced those guidance earlier, and it's not always clear cut, as well as the DeKalb County Health Department. I've been in touch with members of the health department several times, as well as the rest of the staff to try to make the best decisions possible. But one of the things I've asked the staff to do is develop a plan that follows the face mask requirement. So face masks will have to be worn all of the time. Face shields will be permitted, but there are very small exceptions for those things, and it has to do with medical reasons, and in some cases, the curriculum itself. For example, foreign language or speech, where people need to be able to see your mouth and how you're forming the words. But those will be allowed as per the guidance. The last thing is that, and probably the thing that really was most challenging for me was the social distancing, because the ISB guidance allowed you a little bit of leeway. I think the terminology was as best you could or as most reasonable. That was the one point that really kept me up at night. How are we going to make sure that students and staff can maintain that 6 feet of distance? And credit to the team, especially Mark Ekstrom, who's been in and out of all the buildings looking at the different configurations in classrooms to give me a sense of what he thought that we would be able to do. So the plan reflects that. Finally, the plan is not final. We're going to present a plan that is kind of the starting point. There are a lot of details in the plan, but there are a lot of details that still have to be hashed out. So we will continue working on the plan based on feedback that we get from the board, as well as the community and the staff and students. That'll be ongoing. As we get that feedback, we will have to work fairly quickly, though, to finalize the plan, because it needs to be communicated to the community. Parents need the opportunity to make some decisions. And we need to continue moving forward in our plans to finalize things. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Webster to go through the return to learning plan, and then we'd be glad to answer any questions you have after that.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see you again.
Hello.
It's a distance, but it's closer than the last several meetings I've seen you at. It's good to see everybody again. So I'm here tonight to talk about the Return to Learning Plan. We have, because of all of the different possibilities that could happen, we've created 3 different plans that we're ready for anything that happens. But as Mr. Wilder has spoken, the main focus for this plan was having our children back in school, having face-to-face contact with them, and finding a way to keep everybody safe while we do it. Maintaining social distance and following the mask requirements and trying to find the place that best met all the requirements and still got our kids back in school. So here is the tentative plan that we have scheduled today to share with you. It's much more detailed, I'm happy to say, than what I've been able to present the last several meetings. But as Mr. Wilder said, there's still a lot we have yet to determine. So we'll continue to work with the different stakeholder groups to fill in those missing pieces. So without further ado, I'll be happy to share what we have so far. And Mr. Wilder, please feel free to jump in at any time if you wanted to elaborate or pose a different question. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So we've developed a return to school plan for the 2021 school year. We followed our strategic design that always guides our work. And when we decide where we need to start, that's always the place we start. It was developed in collaboration with administration, staff, teachers, union leadership, the Regional Office of Education, as well as survey feedback from parents, teachers, and students. It's been interesting. We've been sending a lot of surveys, and I can honestly say, having been the person who's been sending surveys in the past, the response rate we're getting has been phenomenal, so it's super helpful. So we're very grateful for everybody that's been filling out our surveys, because that really does help us keep our finger on the pulse of kind of what people are thinking and needing. So lots of surveys have gone out, and thank you to David for helping us to get those out as well. The plan that we will be highlighting tonight follows the most current guidelines provided by ISB, the CDC, IDPH, and the DeKalb County Health Department. So I'm sure you're aware that there's lots of places that have lots of opinions and information to share about their recommendations. And we are, as a district, following the guidance of our state leadership, the Illinois State Board of Education. As a public school, they are the ones who provide guidance for us, as well as the medical professionals, both at the state, national, and local levels. So under phase 4, and as Amanda said a few minutes ago, this plan was created with the most recent guidance, which was June 23rd. And every time they release guidance, there's sometimes minor changes and sometimes some major changes in what they require. We are expecting another update from ISB in a week or so, so it's even more important to stress that, again, to Mr. Wilder's point, that this is a draft, and it's not final, and it will continue to meet the guidelines as we receive them. So under phase 4 of the Restore Illinois plan, in addition to the requirement of face masks, the guidelines also recommend maintaining 6 feet of social distance while in school. That is something that was identified at the district level as something that was very important to keep both our adults and our students safe. State officials have also indicated that in order for this, ISB has also strongly said that they wanted students as much as possible to be in person while still maintaining the masks and the 6 feet of social distancing. And they advised districts that up front, they knew that districts were going to have to be creative with their schedules to have both in-person learning and social distancing and masks and all the other things that have to take place for that to occur. So we were creative. So after reviewing the physical spaces, Mr. Ekstrom will be here. He's here. He'll be speaking shortly. He's waving at me. Mr. Ekstrom and I have spent a ton of time together lately, the last several months, because our jobs are so closely entwined. So after reviewing the physical spaces, Mr. Ekstrom did that. It was clear that in order to maintain that 6 feet of social distancing, that we need to alter our schedules to reduce class size. Now, Mr. Ekstrom can explain this to you much more eloquently than I can, but in order for us to be able to maintain that 6 feet guidelines, we just couldn't fit every single student in the class at one time. So this plan, again, based on that guidance, we're recommending the implementation of a hybrid learning approach to instruction when students return to school on August 19th. So I'll explain more about that plan, but a hybrid plan allows for in-person learning as well as learning outside of the classroom so that we can lower the classrooms, be in person with our students, and then still keep people safe. Again, as Mr. Wilder said, this plan is subject to change as the formal guidance or the mandates are changed. And as COVID, as you know, COVID is a moving target. It is not cooperating as far as its predictability. So we kind of have to flow with how that virus moves as well. So in a hybrid learning model, we've developed a blended learning model which places student and staff, both our children and our adult safety, as our top priority, not just as a priority, as our top priority. That was something that was brought to my attention that is 100% true. That is our top priority. The intent of this model is to provide our students with the opportunity for in-person learning while still maintaining the CDC and IDPH guidelines for physical distancing. We're going to have an AB schedule, which I will explain in the next few slides, or we're proposing that, so that student attendance day reduces the number of students in the building, and it makes it much easier for us to be able to apply the physical distancing throughout every aspect of the student's school day. This can reduce the risk of increase in the spread of COVID to students and adults, not just in schools, but really throughout our Sycamore community, so we can help keep those numbers low. Students will follow an AB style scheduled Monday through Thursday. So students that are on the A schedule will attend school on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then students on the B schedule will attend in person on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now Fridays will be an alternating weekly AB schedule, which means some weeks students will be in class for 3 days a week. And I'll show you a sample of that schedule because it sounds a little vague when you hear it just kind of in words. On the days that students are not in school, they will be participating in independent learning as provided by their teacher on the days when they're not there. And this will include our special education inclusion students. They will receive that same. So let's say I'm an A student. On Monday I go to school, I'm in person with my teacher. On Tuesday I work on assignments that she or he assigned and guidance that they provided for me for that work while I'm gone, and I come back on Wednesday and I'm back in person again. Families, we're trying very hard for families to be assigned the same schedule to the greatest extent possible so that there's student continuity across schools. So our goal is to try and make sure that people in the same household have the same schedule, so families are not trying to balance more than one schedule. At this point, we are anticipating an early dismissal, potentially of 1:30 on our attendance days, but that is subject to change based on transportation needs. So that we're waiting to see that. A lot of that's going to depend on kind of how we assign people and the logistical things. That's one of those details that we're still working out. Okay, so that's a sample 2-week in-person learning schedule. So there's your example of week 1. If I was group A, I would go Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If I was group B, I would be Tuesday, Thursday, and then that would flip the next week. While we would absolutely love to be able to have our students in school every single day, every single one of them, and we cannot wait to get them back. We also want to do that safely. So while it is not ideal, obviously, to only have half of our students in class at a time and then have time off, there are some advantages, educational advantages as well. There's a silver lining. As to much of this virus, there are some silver linings. One of the silver linings is that because of the small class size, when our students are with us, we are going to have very small class sizes. Half of the class sizes. So the amount of teacher attention and the ability for our teachers to be able to provide differentiated instruction that targets any specific needs and the depth that they can go is going to be greatly increased with the smaller class sizes. This will be particularly important at the beginning of the year, once we identify any learning loss that occurred, so we can close those gaps as soon as possible and really target that instruction. So the instruction they get on the days they're here is going to be much more targeted individually and in depth than we would be able to provide if they were in school full-time. Obviously, we'd much rather have them in school full-time, but one of the upsides of the smaller classrooms is the way we're going to be able to differentiate. So we also understand that the impact that COVID's had on our most vulnerable student population. So we wanted to address that. So our students who are attending school in self-contained classrooms, whose needs are so significant that they just need really individualized attention. So they are in a self-contained classroom within our buildings. They will be attending school every day to the greatest extent possible. So they will be on a Monday through Friday schedule as much as we can, depending on staffing and all the different things, the details again, that we're still working out. And, Amanda and I didn't even talk about this before today's meeting, but we also realized the impact, and we agree that early childhood is a really key time for providing those readiness skills. And so our students that are in our early childhood program will also attend Monday through Thursday. That's what they typically attend during a regular school year, and they will still follow their regular half-day schedule. So our early childhood students will also, our students that receive the most services and our very youngest students will be in school each day so that we can meet their needs. Did you want me to pause for any questions at this point, or did you want me to continue with the other option if parents do not feel comfortable with the hybrid?
I think it would probably be best for you to complete your presentation and then.
And be ready for the questions? Sounds good. Okay, so we also completely understand and realize that there are families for medical conditions or other reasons who really feel strongly that having their child in school at all is not the best situation for their family. And so we wanted to be respectful of their needs. So for any family that decides that there are some extenuating circumstances that make those 2 or 3 days a week at school not to the best advantage for them, we will be offering a virtual learning option. So they will have that option to choose. The process for that is still a detail that we're working on. Any family that chooses to enroll in that virtual learning option, we do ask that they do so in 9-week increments just to provide consistency. So we realize that maybe there might be families that for the first 9 weeks, one mode works for them, and then they decide after that 9 weeks that a different mode works for them. We don't encourage a lot of variability in between, so that's why we ask for that 9-week commitment, so that we can provide that continuity of instruction for their child. We will make every effort, as much as possible, to ensure that anybody who chooses this virtual option has a reliable internet connection, including providing access to mobile hotspots as available. Those are like gold right now, so again, it's if we can get our hands on them too. I think an important thing to know for both the virtual learning option as well as the hybrid is that this is not the same as we were in the spring. So that was truly an emergency remote learning. That was not true e-learning. That was something that we did to keep kids connected, to keep things moving forward. We're going back to a true learning model. It looks different, may not be exactly how we would like it, but it is a true learning model. It's not a remote emergency plan. And so grading will occur, students will receive grades, and attendance will be taken, just as we would do if we were in a regular traditional school year. So that will be for both the virtual learning plan as well as for the hybrid. So we had a lot of feedback on grades and attendance, and so there are most of the adults are gonna be really happy about that, but some of the kids, we have to remind them, you're gonna be getting the grades this time. So that will be coming as well. So we're trying to mimic as much as possible. We're trying to recreate as much of a normal, so-called normal experience for our students as possible in a very abnormal time. And it's gonna be tricky, but we're up to the challenge. Also, as Amanda spoke about, again, we didn't even talk, she just knew ahead of time. Social and emotional learning. Everybody has been under a tremendous amount of stress during this time. Some people handle that stress better than others, right? Some people, it doesn't seem to affect, other people it does. There's been a multitude of things going on outside of just the pandemic. So we realized that it's going to be extremely important for us to be cognizant and supportive of our student and our staff, both, their social and emotional needs. So in addition to the social and emotional learning, we are also focusing on social and emotional supports and identifying those for our students and staff. We're working on creating a process to identify students and staff who may be experiencing stress or trauma related to COVID-19, and creating a plan to help provide those supports. We already have an SEL curriculum, a social emotional learning curriculum in place, but we will be adding an additional intentional focus on supporting students' emotional health, specific to how they may have been impacted with COVID-19. And we will also continue to create other social and emotional supports as we decide what our students need, as we hear what they need, as we see what they need. Once we actually have them back in our buildings and we can get our eyes on them again and talk to them again, we'll have a much better idea of what they need and how we can better support them. So Mark, Mr. Ekstrom, is going to speak about the safety considerations and from more of the physical plant type of thing. So I'm actually going to let him do his presentation because, again, there's so much of what he and I are like this these days, because so much of what I'm trying to do depends on the physical space, and so much of what he's trying to do with the physical space is depending on what we're trying to do to educate kids. So I'm going to let Mr. Ekstrom speak, and then he and I can answer questions together.
Very good, thank you.
All right, good to see everyone here tonight. So we kind of talked back in June as well about how we were going to open up the buildings so you won't see too much difference in there. And coming through, for safety, that 6 foot is what we're really trying to maintain inside those classrooms. That was the biggest one. First day I got to see Mr. Wilder, that was the thing I told him I needed an answer, 6, 5, 4, 3. And, and he came back with the answer for us that, we're going to stick with that 6 foot radius, and that's where we're then starting to lay out the classrooms that way, to have that for our safest spot for our teachers and for our students inside there. We have worked on several rooms. Steve and I and Nick went through a couple of them just to show what they would kind of look like. Some of the disadvantages are, we're in elementary, and to see some of the things that we have to remove out of those rooms to be able to get that 6 foot distance inside of them. The high school level here, when we take a look at the high school, you won't see much difference at all because those desks are pretty much at 3 feet, and the teacher will have to then assign the kid, A kids will be here, B kids the next day the other seat, and that will put 6 feet in between them. A student walking into that room, though, will notice not too much difference because those desks are pretty much 3 feet apart there, and when you have half a class inside the classroom, and then when they're sitting there, they'll have the spacing that is needed. Of course, they'll be disinfected every night then. As we go through, we'll be starting with our standard protocol of the flu protocol that we usually don't start until January around the district, but that will start on day 1 when we have kids back in, which is high touch areas being wiped down, and then other areas around the building and having that in. As you can see, though, the face coverings for all students and staff will be required as specified by the Illinois State Board of Education and the Department of Public Health. This may be subject to change as guidelines evolve. The district will create then the FACE Act policy that reflects these guidelines so that the administrators have that for them. As we talked about, classrooms will be cleaned daily and disinfected daily. Emphasis will be placed on those high-touch surfaces and common areas. The restrooms, cafeterias, and other common areas will be cleaned throughout the day as we can with the staff that we have available. We are shutting down the water fountains except for the bottle filling stations because those are most, you just have to put your bottle there and it fills up, so there's no touch and having that in. And so that is one thing that the students will notice a little difference with that, but the bottle filling stations will be there, and they'll be highly encouraged to bring their own water bottles from home so that they have water throughout the day. The safety education for the kids then, students will be receiving grade level appropriate education and guidance for proper physical distancing. You got a chance to see some of the things the markings that you'll be seeing on the floors there. If you took a look when you walked in up at the top there, the markings there that show what 6 foot distance looks like. The proper use of PPE, how to put these masks properly on your face. I know if you've been out there in the public, you see people in all different arrays of how these masks are on, and we will go through what the proper face mask covering is for them. Again, proper hand hygiene during the first 2 weeks of school. We'll also be providing that for our students so that they know how to wash those hands correctly for the 20-second time frame. And having that in, the district's health service staff will be developing that plan provided for our students, and specific safety measures to follow, and that's very important for them to keep them safe. Hand washing is our number one thing that we take a look at, along with the 6 foot distance, to keep our kids safe and moving forward. If you came in, you saw the several different hand sanitizing stations. That will be something that we'll be seeing around the district too, is that hand sanitizers will be out and around for them to be able to put that hand sanitizer on with the alcohol that's in there that's above the 60% level. Right now we're running 70% is what I was able to find for us to have inside the dispensers, and I was able to find dispensers then that don't require that product to be in there, because the product that we have in building right now, we cannot get alcohol for them because they're all out of stock. So I found a company out of Dixon to be able to have one that requires anyone that would work in it, and so I got the first 10 in. They're working very well, so I'll be purchasing more of those to be able to put around the building, and they can move anywhere, so they're not mounted to a wall, which is a nice thing. So if we need them somewhere for an event that may be here at the high school, we can pull them from different areas around the high school and put them here for the auditorium, or put them over in the field house or the entrance for the gym. So a lot of stuff that you're going to see has portability to it. And having finding cheap prices is the hardest thing out there, because they've been as high as $500. We will get these ones for much less, around $100 a piece, to bring them in. So we have spent a lot of money on PPE to get prepared to bring our students and staff back safely here in the district. For ISB guidance, then you can kind of see we'll be closely watching. The music has been, we're watching out of Colorado, a research project coming out there, see if ISB will change their mind with some of the music-related courses. Music-related education will continue and follow what the current IDPH and ISB guidelines are for student safety measures there. Physical education, gymnasium, locker rooms, physical education will follow the current most IDPH and ISB guidelines for student safety measures, keeping 6 feet apart. As you read in there, the locker rooms will not be being used for their safety with that. Driver's education has been going on now for 2 months, and it's been going very successfully. Those driver's ed teachers have been working their tail off, keeping those cars nice and clean, going in between, keeping the mask on inside the cars. So it's a driver's ed teacher and 2 students inside that car. They drive for 2 hours. It's the same students in that car for that time frame all week long. So that is their buddy in the car, and then they wipe down in between their hour driving time. And they've been doing a great job keeping everyone safe with that, and getting through a bunch of students that were backlogged on us to get their hours in so that they can be able to get their driver's licenses. You'll be seeing lots of signages are starting to go up around the buildings for washing hands, signs of COVID, how to social distance, how to wear your mask to meet the ISB guidelines. So they have a whole set of those posters out there for us that we'll be tweaking. David is working on that for us to make it look like the Sycamore way. So it has some of the Sycamore things on there. Keep Spartan safe is what it will have on there as a hashtag. And then we'll have that around for students to be seeing that physical one that meets the ISB guidance on for that. In athletics, if you've been seeing out here during the days, our teams have been out there going, and so they've been keeping 6 feet apart. Groups of 50 or less are outside, and then you may be seeing then there's 30-foot space in between those groups. So football's out there with their numbers, and so there is 30 feet between the groups as they're going on out there. Chauncey has done a great job with that, going over all the rules and the regulations with the coaches to keep our students safe outside with the extracurriculars that are going on. We're working with band to get ready for band camp coming on outside here coming up. Cheerleaders were outside here this morning out there doing their items. Tennis has been out playing in their courts out there, and so they have a whole set of guidelines that goes along with ISB, IDPH, and then also with IHSA rules that are out there. They did have to stop football with contact, as you know, last week. That changed, and so but they are still running plays, but no contact, no tackling is occurring outside at this time with the football that is out there. And volleyball is meeting in the field house as well, and also basketball is in the field house practicing with mask on back and forth, keeping 6 feet. And so when I'm around looking at things, they've been doing a great job keeping that distance, going back and forth there, and getting some of the skills down, seeing, you know, you can't see any smiles on, but you can see that they're glad to be back and actually going through. My own son is wore out from the exercise coming back and having in to get ready for a football season that we're hoping for here. All right, that was my end of my slides there. All right, opened up for questions then for both of us up here.
I have one. Because I've spent most of my life in education, the anxiety I feel about our staff and kids coming back is, and many sleepless nights. Can you please tell me what a typical day is going to be like for a student? Because there is never a normal day every day in any school building in any school district, especially in the high school. So how are you going to, you know, just tell me what you're planning for a typical day, let's say at the high school for a student. And staff, are staff required to be here early? Or staff, what are the requirements for the staff? What is a student going to do when they walk in those doors?
Those are all really great questions, and I think to Mr. Wilder's point, those are the details that we have to, once we identify that this is the plan we're moving forward with, those are the details that we have to want to determine, and we want to collaborate on those conversations and those decisions with the people in those buildings and those places to make sure that we're keeping people safe, but also meeting the needs of people there. Mr. Wilder, would you
Yeah, I think that's a really good point and something that we've thought a lot about. You know, what happens from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, and that's going to look a little bit different at the high school, the middle school, and at the elementary level. But all of those teams are already starting to lay out, you know, what I would call rough drafts of what those plans look like. So not allowing students to congregate, you know, outside the main entrance or in large areas where they're going to be in groups of more than 50. Trying to get them moved into the building, potentially straight to their classroom where they're going to be supervised. You know, there's a contractual day that we'll honor in terms of what's going to be expected of staff. But one of the things that we're still working out is supervision, making sure that we've got enough adults in the schools to make sure that kids are safe as they come in, as they move between classes. That's going to be very minimal at the elementary school. The middle school is working on a plan where students would stay put and staff would move. So you're minimizing that contact with other students, and minimizing contact and with students moving around. High school is going to be a challenge. At this point, I foresee that high school students would move in between classes. I think that's the way it's going to have to be, but still working to minimize contact between students. So staggering passing time so you don't have all the students in the hallway at the same time, and things like that. So Julian, I completely echo your concerns. Those are things that we're working through, but I think that we can develop plans to address those to make sure that students and staff are as safe as possible.
So I have a question, Steve, and as we move forward as these details for the common school day are brought together and worked on, this question has been posed to me by other stakeholders in the district, and that is there enough time? Do we need, say, another week to potentially get this plan implemented so that everybody's on board? Because I think right now, what's the start date for school? Is it August?
Students return on August 19th.
19th.
So the question that's been raised to me is August 19 optimistic? Should it be pushed back maybe another week just to potentially hone the plan, to perfect the plan, and implement the plan so everyone's on the same page?
I think that's a really valid concern. You know, do we have enough time? But I would remind everybody, the board as well as the public, that planning for this has been ongoing for a long time already. We've had to plan a little bit and then wait until guidance came out and then plan a little bit more. I think August 19th is still realistic, but there's a lot of work that's going to have to be done between now and then. One thing I would tell the board is that if we get to a point, let's say a week or two from now, and we don't feel like that plan is coming together, I'm going to communicate that to the board and we're going to reassess where we're at. But I think it's to our advantage to continue moving forward with the August 19th goal. Like I said, I think it's still realistic, but there's a lot of work that's got to be done. But we've got great teams who have really come together, and really I think at this point, kind of waiting for some feedback tonight so we can continue to take those next steps. So as I mentioned, you know, Julian's question is a really good one, but I think it's also an example of where we're at with a lot of aspects of the planning. You know, we've got kind of rough ideas or rough drafts of what we'd like to do. At this point, part of what we need is just some affirmation or reinforcement of, yep, you're moving in the right direction. We can support that, or we need to change direction. So I still think August 19th is realistic, but it's going to be a lift to get there.
Okay, good. Thanks, Steve.
I have the same concern on the timing. Just, you know, with all the good questions that the teachers have submitted, they're all pretty much valid questions that need to be answered. I see it that the district has been planning for quite some time for this process, but if we wait till that, you know, 3 weeks from now when we're a week out of school, and then you expect all the staff to be able to hit the ground running there, I'm not sure there's enough time for the teachers to be properly prepared for whatever that plan looks like then, knowing that we don't have all the answers to these questions yet, knowing that the state is going to come out with another set of guidelines in a week, knowing that, you know, even in the presentation tonight, there's a few things that we just don't know. You know, what does PE look like? Can we use the fitness center? Who's going to clean it between every class period? Lunch, band, all those larger group meetings. I think it would be prudent to seriously consider pushing some stuff back. I think that the teachers were probably going to be more likely to go later in the year if they had to, and knew that they could be prepared for what the school year is going to hold, because we aren't going to know the answers to those questions until the final hour in some cases. So I feel strongly that we ought to be considering a calendar change too.
I would just interject that staff has been involved all along the way at different levels. And obviously you can't involve all of the staff members, so it's been staff members who've been working, you know, in kind of a committee fashion. Planning has been ongoing. We're getting ready to launch a lot of professional development for the staff that they're going to have a chance to work through at their own pace that really aligns with what we're going to be asking them to do. Certainly willing to tweak that and change that if we need to. I think it's realistic to start on August 19th, but if the board would like to push back the start of school, the sooner we know that, the better.
That's where I would be at. So I have some other questions if you want some.
I guess for me, Steve, if I could just, you know, I mean, I trust Steve's judgment. You know, we're not in the trenches with Steve and staff every day. So if he feels comfortable with an August 19th date, I think we should trust his judgment. That being said, I think Steve already said that, you know, if it looks like things aren't coming together and this isn't possible, then we can always call an audible here. But I think it's too early to call that audible at tonight's meeting to push that start date from what we know. So just my 2 cents.
And part of why I say that too is having lived through a situation where we had to push the calendar back, the start of the year back. It was for construction reasons. It wasn't for a situation like this. We kind of identified a timeline where it was a drop dead. You know, by this date, we need to know if we're going to push the calendar back. We ended up doing that because we needed that time for construction. This is different. One approach would be, you know, give us a couple of weeks and identify perhaps the end of July. I think that date is the 31st. You know, if we feel like we're still on target by July 31st, I think we press on. If we're not, if we feel like we're starting to hit those obstacles and questions and issues, on July 31st, I'll report that to the board and we can start to implement, you know, planning to push the calendar back. I would work with the calendar committee, obviously, to do that, but that's another option, is to give us some time to make progress and then see where we're at the end of July.
I'm fine with that. That's what I foresee, and I see a lot of other districts already proactively doing that, so that's why I bring that up. The other one I had is, I have no inside knowledge, but I have a sneaking suspicion that whether it be right around the middle of August, or whether it be 3 to 4 weeks into the school year, that we will start paying for the sins of some of the hotspot states and the large city that's located in our state, and we might be shut down. So I know you said we're working on all three plans, but I really feel strongly that there should be, once we get through these couple of weeks to determine if we're going to be able to implement the plan that we presented, we really need to have a transition plan in place, because it's not going to be viewed as an emergency transition like March was. It's going to be, you guys should know about this, you know exactly how you're going to handle it. So I'd be interested to know a little bit more about that either tonight or in an update in the near future.
And actually, the information that we shared with you this evening was specific to the hybrid plan, because that's the plan that the district is proposing for at this time, for the beginning of the school year, based on the information that we have. But I'm also working on a separate document that is much longer, that actually has all three scenarios. What will we do as a district if we are in any stage, any phase of the Restore Illinois plan, and we get moved to a different one? Whether it's we're in at a hybrid model and the wonderful news comes that we can come back fully in person, how do we transition to that? Because that will also be a transition. I mean, all of this is going to be a transition. Even good transitions are stressful in our transition, so we're planning for that. We also are working on, so we have the three plans. We have a plan for remote, we have a plan for the hybrid, we have a plan for fully in person. And so now what we're working on is the overarching plan, just like this one. And now what I've been looking at this week is, now that we kind of have this one a little bit more pulled out separate as our tentative plan, is how do we move between all three of those plans nimbly? That's my word. I'm focusing in my head right now. My mantra is nimble. How can we be nimble? Because if we've learned anything from COVID, we know that we have to be nimble because things change so quickly. Information we have in the morning is not always the same information we have even that same afternoon. And exactly like you said, it's not going to be the same. It's in the spring, it was like we were blindsided by it, and now we know it's in existence. We've been living with it, unfortunately, for 6 months now, 5 months now. Feels like 50 years, but and so we are working on it. We do have a draft of all of those plans, and now it's just a matter of, once we get our kids set and ready to go for the beginning of the school year, we will also have that backup plan. Right now, we really want to focus on how do we get our kiddos here August 19th? How do we see those faces again in a way that's safe? And once we have that done, we will find a way to tailor, kind of weave all three of those plans together so that they're not separate, right? So that they actually have little paths between. In my head, I see little paths that travel back and forth between them, that we can communicate both to the board and to stakeholders, so that they know in that occasion, if that does happen, this is kind of how it will look. Right now, we want to make sure we're ready for our students on August 19th, but we do have the sketch of those other plans ready to go.
I think that's what's made this whole thing, all of COVID, so hard, is I think people yearn for predictability. Tell me when it's going to be over, or tell me when I can have my kids back in school safely, when staff can be back in school, and that's just not the reality. No. Even for our business, it changes, and sometimes many times during the same day. And so I'm not sure I'm on board with pushing the calendar around. I'm not sure that even if we push it back 2 weeks, and those ensuing 2 weeks, I feel like still different guidelines could come out that will make us pivot again.
Yes.
And I'm glad your word is nimble. That's one of the things that's always drove me crazy, is we're a big beast of a operation, and we're never very good at being nimble. And if that's another silver lining that comes out of this, that would be awesome.
I agree. And I do agree. I certainly understand the hesitation about making sure everybody's ready and wanting to be ready, but I do think there's merit also in what you say, Mrs. Wren, in that I think we're going to be in a state of constantly changing. Like, I don't think that August 19th is going to come and all of a sudden nothing is going to change after that. I think that we will be needing to be nimble more often than not throughout the course of this school year. And so just trying to give each other the grace of knowing that we're all on the same page, right? So everybody, in the way I look at it, everybody has a positive intent. We talk about this a lot in PLC. And so even if we have differing viewpoints here or in the community or outside of here, it's because everybody wants the best for their kids, right? We all want the best for our kids. And so really kind of keeping that in the forefront and knowing that everybody's doing the very best they can in a really absurd situation. So, yes, so we are working very hard to be nimble, but our focus right now is August 19th. and making sure our teachers are ready and safe, and our kids are ready and safe, and that we get to see them.
Hey, Chris, I have a question regarding the technology front, and I know you're not the, but you're interlinked, and even more so now, unfortunately.
Yes, we are.
How are we doing with devices? I know we were short when the pandemic went down, and I know we have some on order, compliments of some CARES Act money. Are we on point and on time in receiving those? How are we anticipating
We
those?
are receiving regular updates from the vendor. At this point, we do not have, to my knowledge, as of today, do not have a delivery date. But we are, I know Roxanne and I spoke today, and she's keeping in constant contact with them. They're doing the best they can to fulfill the orders. But that's the most up-to-date information I have on that.
Yes, that's been a little bit of a struggle, is just getting a drop-dead date for delivery. COVID has affected us around the world, and some of these devices are coming from overseas. But Roxanne also has a plan in place to get the year started if we don't have the devices on hand. You know, getting them, kind of shuffling them from perhaps one school to another, so that we can get started, and then when the new devices come in, get them set up immediately and then get them out to students. So that's a little bit of a challenge. It's beyond our control. But again, we've already got a backup plan to at least get the school year started and then get those in students' hands as fast as we can.
And that will be so much easier to do with the hybrid model, because we'll actually have students in buildings. It's so much easier to do what we need to do if there's a delay in the technology, or to disseminate the technology, or whatever we need to do. That's another benefit of having the hybrid plan, is that we will have contact with every one of our kids to be able to do that in person, which makes that process much more smooth.
Dr. Webster, I have a few things for you, and I want to start by thanking you for bringing up the expectation that we've all entered into this with the intent of doing what's best for all of our stakeholders. I know we didn't have the luxury of having Mr. Wesley or Mr. Janish here to write our norms for our meeting up on the board, but assume good intent is always one of them, right? I think everybody's here volunteering their time or you know, engaging in a career because they want to do what's best for the community. So I want to thank you for bringing that up. With that, I've done a lot of thinking about this and spent the better part of the weekend writing down my thoughts. And when I reached 2,000 words on my Word document, I went outside and had a drink and said, okay, I need to take a little break. But since the purpose of this meeting is to share some feedback, I wanted to provide some of the thoughts that I had, and I'll try and be somewhat concise about it, but since they're so wide-ranging, it's going to be hard for me to keep a nice, predictable flow here. As it relates to the online planning, I think that is the details of that plan need to be presented as soon as is humanly possible, because I think that the people in the community that we're expecting to make that decision about whether they send their kids to school or what they're going to do for care for their children is going to be dependent in large part on what that plan looks like and whether they think it's something that they can help facilitate or not. And so the earlier that they have that information, the easier it's going to be for those stakeholders to make that decision. And it might also help us inform our hybrid or in-class decision when we know how many people are going to elect to go that route.
Absolutely, yes.
The second relates to the conversation about the delayed school learning, and I've been involved in enough projects to know that whenever you delay something early, you can always find a way to fill that time. I mean, we could easily add a month to our summer schedule, and we'd find a reason to justify what we could do in that time to get us better prepared. I think we would also never be to the point where we say we're 100% prepared. The bigger concern I have with that, and this came out of a study that I was looking at over the weekend by an organization called the Northwestern Education Association, I believe, and they looked at map data. And their concern, or the reason they started this research, was to look at what happens to kids, and they based it on map data, if I didn't say that. They looked at kids and said, what usually occurs during the summer slide? How much of their education is lost, and how much of the next school year do we spend just trying to recoup that? Well, now let's take that 8-week summer slide and assume that those kids haven't had any intentional instruction since mid-March. And now they have that much time between mid-March and mid-August or September before they start education. How much of their last school year have they retained? And on the verbal side, or the verbal written side, they estimated that maybe 70% of last year's knowledge was retained. And on the math side, it was as little as 0%, depending on what grade level you were looking at. So my concern is every week, every month that we delay, the farther that gap is that we're creating that we now have to overcome. And we have to try and overcome that gap, that much education loss in a hybrid learning environment, which leads me to my next kind of thought, which is some of the flaws I see in the hybrid system. And I fully acknowledge that there's no perfect system. So I'm really just throwing out the flaws there just for consideration, just so that you know what I've heard from other community members or from just, my own contemplations on where there are issues. And I'll approach this first from saying I took a class online about marketing. It was a business class. It was an online class, so if I miss anything, if someone's fact-checking me and I get something wrong, I blame it on it being an online class. But they said to have a successful business or successful product, there are 3 different areas you can consider, right? You can compete on what your product's features are, you can compete on what your product's cost is, or you can compete on the service you provide around that. And they give examples of different companies. You can either have the cheapest product or the most featureful product, or or just have the best environment or service. But you really have to excel in 2 to have a winning model. And so I can kind of extrapolate that and say, well, when we look at the different educational delivery models we're talking about, what are those different aspects that we're trying to create a business around? In this case, I think our main considerations are, what are the risk level associated with that delivery? What's the cost associated with running that program, and what's the quality of the education that we're able to provide? And I guess when I look critically at the hybrid model, I don't see how any of those 3 areas is something that model excels at. I don't feel like the risk has been terribly mitigated. There certainly still is risk, and we could obviously debate for the next decade over what that level of risk is. The quality of the education, we still have children that are going to go as much as 4 days without seeing a teacher in person. Maybe the education is still better than full online. I certainly can't argue that and haven't done the research on it, but I would still say it's not as good as a full-time in-person education. And from a cost standpoint, it sounds like we're teaching half the capacity of students at any given time, but if anything, our costs are as much or greater than full in-time education. So I fail to see on any of those 3 axes where this model excels. And that kind of leads me to my next topic, which is budget. And I'm going to try and say this without sounding sensationalist, but in 2008, 2009, we experienced a recession that we spent the next decade trying to dig ourselves out of. And we've just recently gotten to the point where we've got a balanced budget, we're trying to build up fund reserves, and we're now going through yet another recession. And there's arguments about whether we're out of that recession or still in it, but I think a reasonable person could assume that we are going to be dealing with this virus for years to come, not months. The fastest we've ever had a vaccine was on the scale of 4 years, more typically decades. And I'm not trying to make everyone get even more scared about this thing. I know there will be treatments that are going to make it easier for us to deal with, but realistically, we have to assume that this threat's going to be around not just this school year or the next school year, but possibly for the entire time that a student's going to be going through our high school or our middle school or our elementary schools. And I think that it's with that timeline that we have to think about how are we going to manage ourselves through that, not only from the aspect of what type of education are we going to deliver during that time, but how are we going to pay for it? Because if we continue to see our economy pressured by parents not able to go back to school or not able to go back to work or having to stay home to school their children, and if we think about forced evictions and other things that come with being in some sort of drawn-out recession, we can easily get back to the place where we were in 2008, 2009, where property values are dropping, revenues dropping, but our expenses have done nothing but go up because we've had to pay for additional online resources, additional cleaning, et cetera. So I just want to, and I don't have the answers to any of this, and I don't expect that anybody has any answers to this, but I think it's something that we need to be very proactive about over the next 12 months as we figure out how we are going to survive that sort of an economic environment and educational environment for a time period that could, like I said, last 5, 6, 10 years, who knows? I mean, God willing, I hope that this is all done in a year and we've got a vaccine and everything's back to normal. I think we'd all love that. But I think we owe our community, our taxpayers, our district, and our kids the effort to look into those things and then to be proactive as much as we can without obviously affecting their education too much. So that's most of what I had.
I absolutely think all those things are important, and I'm sitting here thinking, I want people alive and safe. And to me, our goal, if we're going to insist our kids come back into these buildings, number one, I don't care about anything else, they have to be safe. Kids are resilient, kids are like sponges. I'm not worrying about they're going to be 17 months behind. kids will learn. And I think our goal in all of this, teachers have to be safe, maintenance people have to be safe, secretaries have to be safe. And how are we guaranteeing that? And that's my fear. And when I listen to this, I'm ready to explode, because I think, my God, how are you going to make sure these people are safe in these buildings? And I'm not criticizing you. You guys have done fantastic. But I know what you're saying is extremely important. But the important thing, and you have kids, I have grandkids, I have kids that are going to be teachers here. I am scared to death about them coming back to these buildings. This virus is deadly, and that needs to be our key. Jim?
There's people in the audience trying to speak.
No. I'm sorry, but our protocol is that you speak during audience to visitors, and that only the board speaks afterwards. I do want to say, though, that we have received a lot of comments from our constituents, from our stakeholders, and I think the superintendent has been very good about pushing out information that he's received in terms of questions, inputs, suggestions. Sometimes you look at some of this information and questions that come at you from all these different directions, and you just wonder how you can find any kind of a pathway at all. We're getting guidance from, and you've heard all the acronyms, ISB, IDPH, the World Health Organization, the local health authorities. Everybody has guidance and pushes us one way and pushes us the other way, and we have to somehow live within all those guidelines. And I think what we've talked about here is when we need to zig, we'll zig, and when we need to zag, we'll zag. And I think we have enough flexibility to do that. But I do think that the overall arching concern is to provide a safe environment for learning, for the people who teach, for the people who are administrators in our buildings, for the people who clean the buildings, for the students who come here to learn. All this has to be balanced, and we're trying the best that we can to do that. And everybody's going to have a little bit of a different viewpoint about where that balance lies or where it's best to go. But our job as a board is to try to navigate and try to form the best course that we can, and then to go forward. And I think we're all working hard at trying to do that. I think we all probably lose sleep at night thinking about some of these issues and how to bring a resolution about. So it is something that we struggle with. I do have a couple questions, though. And one of the things that I struggle with the most, I think, is the idea of transportation and school buses. And, the guidelines now, the guidelines were very, very strict. I think we could have had maybe, 7 or 10 people on a bus or something? 12, yeah. And now we can have 50. And I'm like, these are going to be students of all ages, of all going to different schools because of the way our transportation has been working out. And I haven't heard anybody address transportation yet, and I was kind of wondering.
We've been discussing transportation. I would defer to Mrs. Stuckert. She would have the most up-to-date information.
So we haven't finalized anything transportation-wise, just due to where we're at right now with the hybrid model. So we don't know what students are going to be going what days and what that's going to look like. So we've talked about staggered starts, which is something we've talked about for years doing, so that might be something that we need to do. We want to be able to keep families together on the bus, so looking at that as well. But I don't have a final answer for you guys today how that'll look, but we'll be working within the guidelines put out there by ISB, and making sure that we're keeping under that threshold, and also cleaning the buses after our routes as well. Working with Mark on how that's going to look and who's going to do that. So I don't have an answer for you tonight, Jim, but it's definitely something that's in the works.
Yeah, and it's something that really has been worrying me, so I'm looking forward to hearing what we're going to do along those lines, because that's going to be, I think, a difficult situation for us. What about coordinating childcare? I didn't hear anything about that, and maybe you can address that issue. I know there are going to be a lot of parents who are concerned about that.
I know childcare is a national issue. I would defer to Mr. Wilder on the childcare question.
Yeah, so that's been an important topic. We recognize that that's a need amongst community members. You know, they need to go back to work. You know, they're being called to go back to work. So the biggest issue that we're facing is space. And how do we get X amount of students or young children and staff into the building safely? So one of the things that we're looking at is Oscar and what that might look like. We've got some concerns about space regarding Oscar, but I've had several conversations with Courtney about how that might look. We're hopeful that we've got a plan that will work, but I will tell you that I think if we can develop that plan and implement it, it's going to look different than what Oscar typically looks like. The district is not going to be able to provide childcare other than that. However, with one exception, one of the things that we know is that we've got staff who have childcare needs. And one of the things we're looking at is providing childcare on a pay-as-you-go basis for staff so that their children can be watched during the day. School-age children can be watched during the day on the days that they're not in school. Again, it really falls down to a space issue and what we're able to provide. One of the things that Courtney is also doing is contacting local agencies.
That's what I was going to just ask about.
So the Park District, the YMCA, other child care providers, early child care, early childhood centers. What's their capacity? What are they able to do? And again, thinking outside of the box a little bit. It may not be something that they've done in the past.
Right.
But they recognize that there's a need, and I know that one of those groups in specific, the Park District, has been very open to talking about it. But they're having to be flexible, and I think nimble's a really good word on what they're going to be able to do. But again, they recognize the need. We know that we can only provide so much, but we know we've got partners in the community, church organizations too, that might be able to offer childcare that didn't before. So we recognize that that's a need, that we're having conversations about that, but we're really going to have to involve community partners to make that work just because of space.
I totally agree, and I'm glad to hear that we're reaching out to do that. With the way that the schedule is proposed, are we going to have enough time to clean adequately classrooms?
So with the daily touch, that stuff that we have, we'll be able to do it. We will need some help from the teachers though, especially at the high school level, because they'll be going in between their class periods there and coming in. So we're working on them to have some cleaning supplies, the rooms so they can wipe down areas. Every time we meet with the health department to let you know, it's not a contact virus. Contact is very little. At one of the meetings that we're at, they even said that, for outside, for playgrounds, that you shouldn't have to worry too much outside with them because it's not sticking to surfaces. It's an airborne thing. It's in rooms with people without masks on, not following the social distancing and having through. So, when we take a look at the contact side, I feel very confident we can be able to keep that clean. It's the airborne side that if they don't have the mask on, that 6 feet thing is what's really is the key to keeping them safe for that part. But we will need some teacher support to be able to clean some things inside the classrooms. Elementary, again, not sharing anything here. We spend so much time teaching them how to share. Now they will spend all their time that this is mine and you can't touch. So it just breaks my heart when you really think about that part there and having in. So that side, and then, cleaning staff-wise, if we start having some of our guys go down, that will be our challenge, is finding enough staff to keep some areas going. And so that is my concern I brought up to our upper administration team there. That just like anywhere around, talk to DeKalb, we meet every week, all the county schools do, and we meet with the health department as well, and we come up with our concerns and how to move forward and how to find some people. We still have an opening here at the high school that we need to fill that's been out there since May, and I've had one applicant. So we really need people applying to come in for those spots. We have a sub spot that's been out there since February, and no one has applied for the sub spot for any of the custodians that we have out to be able to fill in buildings when we have custodians go down and having there. So but it will be a team effort to be able to come through and keep those surfaces. But again, I feel the surfaces it's truly to keep the distance, keep masks on, then that will help us achieve our goal of the safety in the classroom.
What about young students, the kids in kindergarten and first grade and second grade and maybe even beyond that? Are we really going to be able to have them keep their face masks on during the day?
That's the biggest challenge ever. I mean, when you take a look at the guidelines there, they say really to get outside, they're going to have to go outside and do mask breaks. So they're going to have to go out there. I mean, as you know, I got this one on here. I have to go out for a mask brace myself. Go in area, I'm away from everyone, take this mask off, take some deep breaths that are cold air coming into my lungs and having that set and going. So that would be something that we would really look at with the elementary level, is that they need to get outside, spread out, take those masks off, do some activities outside, read in the grass, but keep yourself 7-8 feet apart, read there, and enjoy some things that we usually do in the fall, but just be at a smaller number inside those classrooms and moving in. But the biggest key is to get outside when you can, take those masks off. They talked about for recess outside, if you can keep the kids 6 feet apart, which, being an elementary principal for all those years, I don't know how we can keep anyone 6 feet apart and coming in with that part, but if they can get their spacing out there, they can take those masks off and run. And coming in, we're watching with some of the sports out right now. If they're outside and they keep that distance, they can have those masks off and be running out there and having that set. And so, but it's going to be a challenge. And again, all the things that we talked about, how to play nicely, play close together and kind of coming in, now we're going to be working on that you have to keep your distance. And you will see it with people, when you're kind of walking around, I'm in a person's space zone. I always don't know that distance, so people always step back because I'm always too close. And I realize, oh shoot, I need to move another couple feet back because I can't hear worth a darn, so I'm always moving closer to here and having. But you can see it now with people, even in the grocery stores and everywhere else, that, they kind of step back, they kind of know what that 6 feet's really starting to look like, and because it's everywhere that we go and having that part.
So I'm going to piggyback on that just a little bit, because then, a lot of times what I've heard the follow-up question is, so what happens when students quit wearing their mask and it becomes difficult? And kindergarten and first grade is one thing, but junior high school is a different ballgame.
Right.
My desire is that we avoid disciplining students as much as possible for that purpose. Legally, we're able to do that. What we'll do is try to be more proactive. Obviously, conversations with students may end up with calls home to parents just to let them know that we're having trouble with that. But at some point, we're also legally able to require that they take the remote learning option. So there are steps in place to manage that. Part of it is kids who just aren't used to doing that, and part of it is with students who may choose not to do that and defy what they're directed to do. So there's a plan in place for that as well.
So if I can chime in on what one of my neighbors is doing, she has small children, and I talked to her over the weekend. She is already training her kindergartner how to wear a mask. Mm-hmm. So, and she's being positive about that. So if you have a young child at home, now's the time to start, with the mask and be positive. And it's great to hear things like that. And believe me, I don't envy anyone's position on this topic, but it's a good way to start now, and that way it won't be as big of an issue come August 19.
Yep,
Just
that is correct. Yeah,
just thought I'd share that.
Yeah, I was talking to my nephew or my brother-in-law last night to get his kids ready for down in Bloomington normal. And I said, start with 20 minutes and then work up to 30, then get up to 45, then get up to an hour, and then keep moving forward that way, because he's got a kindergartner coming in and a second grader. And so how to get them ready when they've been no mask at all, because they've been self-isolating this whole time, which many of our families have in our area. They haven't left their houses for hardly anything. And so they haven't had masks on. Where compared to me, I've been out every day with it.
Is this something that maybe we could use social media and our website to kind of start to promote that? So, so that people know that.
David's on that, to kind of push that out for us. So the kids can parents can get ready.
Yeah, maybe we could find a way to make it a little more fun and a little more interesting for them, so that there's motivation to do it. What about testing? Are we going to do any testing? We're just going to rely on self-reporting, or?
Yeah.
We're going to
go ahead, Steve. You can let them.
Good question. That's one of the things that's required. Testing students every day can be a logistical nightmare.
Yes.
So one of the things that Nick has really taken the lead on is working with our attorneys about options. Meeting the legal requirement, but also meeting the safety requirement. So one of the things that we're investigating is a self-reporting form for students and staff at the beginning of the, parents and staff at the beginning of the school year, that they'll monitor, student symptoms for temperature, cough, fever, you name it, and that they will report that as the year goes on. That's an easy way to do it. We could do that at the beginning of the year. We can do that more frequently. But all teachers, Mark mentioned the flu planning, the cleaning that we implement, and the same thing would apply there. Teachers are used to looking for symptoms like that. So we'll also need to be alert to situations where students may not show that symptom at the beginning of the day, but start to show it throughout the day, and then work with our nurses and health aides in the schools to address that. So we are going to rely on parents and on the honor system to some degree, but we'll also have mechanisms in place to check that pretty regularly.
Which I think is a good segue to my next question, and that is, I saw a fair number of comments from parents who wanted to know just what happens when somebody does get sick, when one of the students, let's say, comes down with COVID.
Sure.
And I just wonder if we could do you think we could somehow contact the health department and have somebody come in and address us and really our public, and just let people know in a general sense? I know they can't say each situation is going to be different, but they can at least give parents and the community kind of an idea of what happens when somebody does come down with COVID. I'm not completely sure what the process is, but I think it would go a long way toward maybe helping people feel a little more comfortable, a little safer when they find out that there is a process and just what the heck it is, because I would like to know.
It's a really good question, and Nick's taken the lead on this also, and trying to figure out what the protocol is so that we can communicate that to our staff. There is some protocol in place, but the health department is still developing some of those protocols. So,
Right.
Nick, do you want to talk to that point?
Yeah, on each case, we work very closely with our county health department, and then they kind of walk us through step by step what that's going to look like. There's no magic number right now that they give that 1 or 2 cases is going to close down a school. It's all situational, and I think that's really tough for people to hear, because we want black and white answers, right, for something that is so unpredictable. So we work really closely with them. They kind of take the lead in terms of contact tracing and stuff.
Yeah. And I understand that, and I'm not asking them to say, what's going to happen in minute detail, but it would be nice to at least have them at least kind of lay out what the framework is, what they do, how they respond, where it goes, who they refer the matter to, who they get advice from, how they follow up with contacts and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we can reach out to the health department and see if
we could ask them. They
representative
can refuse to come, I suppose, but
they've been great to work with.
Yeah.
They've got great staff who are putting in a lot of hours, but I think surely they would be able to find somebody that can come to the next meeting and talk about it.
And I think just so that parents especially know that there's some kind of a procedure in place and what the framework would at least look like, that would probably be reassuring for some. And then when if God forbid we have to go through that, it won't be totally foreign. At least they would have heard, the basic structure. So.
Yeah.
I probably said more than enough.
Well, can I add to that real quick? So will there be some type of guideline of, I have a family, somebody in my household who has tested positive, which then would mean my kids need to stay home? Will we have at least that type of framework built in so that parents know how to react in regards to, even down to the scenario of somebody at my work tests positive and I have kids in my house and now I'm getting tested. Do I send my kids to school? Do I keep them home? Will there be a guideline specifically to say, okay, in these certain situations, we want you to keep your kid home. We want you to err on the side of caution. Will we have that built?
Well, we'll have to communicate that on a regular basis. Be cautious, be overly cautious. You're better to keep your student home for a day and miss one of those days as opposed to sending them and taking the risk.
And hopefully the health department could say, well, in that situation, you'd contact your physician, or you'd contact the health department, or, this is where you reach out to find out the answers to those questions when they come up.
The challenge is maintaining confidentiality. Sure. With both students and staff. And that's one thing that the health department has been really good about is getting involved in managing that. But we will communicate what the expectation will be for parents in terms of reporting, and then steps after that to take care of their children.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, there's going to be a lot of, if the hybrid models where you're going, you're going to be dealing with a lot of parents who are in a position where they need to go to work. And what is erring on the side of caution for some parents is not erring on the side of caution when bills need to be paid. And when, no, they're probably fine, it's just allergies, and, it turns out to not be that. So I think having a little bit, I deal with it at work. There's so many different scenarios. I totally get that, but to have a frame in place to first say, if there's someone in your house who tested positive, keep your kid home. I mean, those basic things there, so that there's at least a shell to, hey, this is how we're going to approach this. You're not going to be able to cover everything. It's impossible. I understand that, but yeah, I would love to see something like that go out to parents, so that parents have some type of level of understanding of where that stands.
Yeah.
And Jim, you touched on social media and using that as a guide, and perhaps we can pump that out to our stakeholders too, and here are the resources, here are the websites, here are the numbers to say the DeKalb County Health Department. If we do have, followed by initially the protocol that you talked about, James, the basic steps, and then here are the resources. That way parents have that at their fingertip on where to go.
I think that's a great idea. I think we should have a dedicated section on our website and in our social media that has all that information in it.
Definitely. I have a couple questions in regards to the e-learning process and plan. I know we've kind of talked about it in other board meetings, but I don't think we specifically had said this tonight. But the plan is to be one-to-one. I know there's potentially a delay, K through 12, right? So that is everybody in a true e-learning platform, however that looks like, whether it's a hybrid days or you choosing to opt to the e-learning plan. That is correct, right?
That is the plan, yes. And in addition to, with the addition of the technology, it really is, of course, obviously to support any of the days that students are e-learning, or if we end up going back to stage 3 and we're fully home. But we're also focusing a lot of our professional development on how to use technology to enhance instruction regardless of the setting. So whether we're in classroom, how do we use that technology to enhance instruction? If they're at home, how do we use that to enhance instruction? And if we're remote, because technology is, the potential of technology is absolutely going to be crucial for any time that we're out of school, but can really transform the way we provide education for kids and opportunities within a regular school day as well.
Sure. So as in a hybrid, in just kind of getting your thoughts, I'm trying to ask a specific question in a situation where I know you can't give me a specific answer. But in a hybrid scenario where I'm sending my child on a Monday and I know I'm sending them back, and then they're staying home on a Tuesday and learning in an e-learning model or whatever we're going to specifically call that, and then I'm sending them back to school on Wednesday, will that objective on Tuesday be practical items that will need to be accomplished for Wednesday's school day? I mean, is that really the goal here, is to keep our students on task throughout the week? Because, I mean, let's face it, if we look back at what the spring held, there would be nothing to prevent a parent to get behind in a day or whatever happened on that Tuesday. If chaos ensued, I could maybe double up a day the next day, but maybe what's kind of our thought process there on what that Tuesday would hold for that student? Is there really going to be practical activity that they have to get done? There's more structure to it to really make them do something on that Tuesday, as opposed to putting it off for another day or whatever that may be.
Well, there are many different instructional approaches that we can take on how to approach that non-school day, that non-attendance day. It will still be a school day. So, one approach is we teach the core content really in depth, like literacy and math, which are the areas that, especially in elementary, math especially is an area that parents feel the least comfortable supporting their children with. So making sure that we really cover the core content areas and then provide practice and supplementary activities on Tuesdays, in that example. There's also the idea of a flipped classroom where you do the exact opposite thing, and you provide instruction for students while they're at home, and you provide the time at school for them to practice it, so the teacher is there to provide any guidance and can catch the errors in real time, especially in a small classroom. So a lot of that depends on what's being taught, the purpose of the lesson, the age of the students. So there are lots of different ways, but those days that they're not in school, they will be actively engaged in learning in some way. And so it's not going to be exactly the same as it was, James, over the spring. Like you said, that there was kind of, especially at the elementary level, if they missed Monday, they could catch up on Tuesday. But I think because they're going to be in school in person with a teacher for that guidance to keep them on track, it's going to be different than them being home every day without that direct personal contact with their teachers. So if there was a situation, which may happen, if there's someone home that's sick, or if we have an essential worker who is working a lot of hours on the Tuesday that I happen to be home and I'm with my older sibling, and I can't get to my work, then the beauty of the hybrid model is that when I go back on Wednesday, especially when I only have 10, 12, 15 kids in my classroom, my teacher now has time to help me get caught up on what I would have missed and to provide the supports I need so I don't fall behind.
Sure. No, thank you for that. I appreciate that. That gives me as much clarification as you can. You're as specific as possible. I appreciate it.
Try.
I just want to go back and also echo something that Eric had mentioned in regards to families that will choose the all stay-at-home option for e-learning. I just want to basically just agree with him that I think will those families then have that opportunity to learn a little bit about it, or be able to send them a document to where they can understand what exactly they're signing up for before making that decision? And again, along with the time frame, I'm not a fan of pushing school back if we don't absolutely have to for some unforeseen reason. But it seems, Steve, you've alluded to that we're pressing forward and we're going to try to make that work. They're going to have to elect that at some point, and I think it would be as much information we can give to them so that they're making a good and accurate choice that is going to be very crucial to that child's success, and that parent being able to facilitate that education without contact with the teacher potentially. So
That's our goal as well, is to get that clarified. We have some ideas, but nothing solidified at this point. We have some ideas that are floating out there. And that is also another reason why we asked for just a 9-week commitment instead of a semester-long commitment, knowing that we want to be flexible in meeting the changing needs of parents. And so if I'm a parent that is really concerned about sending my child back to school, and I just don't feel I'm ready, and then 9 weeks in, I kind of have a better idea of what it looks like and what it's going to be, and I do want my child in school, then I have that option. I don't have to wait until December. So again, yes, we absolutely want to get more detail out. We're going to finalize those plans, but that is also why we built in the flexibility of 9 weeks, because even with the plan, sometimes when something's on paper, you don't quite understand it the same way as when it's actually, like, it sounds different than it is, for better or for worse, right? So, I mean, maybe there'll be people that will opt in after 9 weeks. It's hard to tell. So we are working on that.
okay, fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the questions.
I had a couple more, Dr. Webster, regarding the online platform. One is I get the sense from your discussion that most of that instruction is going to be non-interactive, from the standpoint of there won't be a set time, from 1 to 2 o'clock where the child is engaged in X activity, where the teacher is live streaming something, or an activity to that effect. Is that correct?
That hasn't actually been decided yet for sure, one way or the other. So I wouldn't rule anything in or out at this point, because there are lots of ideas.
Well, then I would ask for your consideration in coming up with that plan, that you acknowledge that those students may likely be in a daycare scenario where they are not going to have access to said technology at any given time of day, depending on what their parents' work schedule is like and what their daycare scenario looks like. So just be cognizant of that.
Absolutely. And anything that, if there was a live, like Google Meets, like if a teacher had time with a Google Meets, or if there was something that a teacher was providing live to a small group of students or whatever, I would imagine we would try to make access to that in a recorded version at some point later. But that, again, that idea has not been decided on one way or the other. So I wouldn't want to say that I would rule anything completely in or completely out at this point.
Sure, and I hope we're able to work with the teachers to come up with a workable solution where maybe for those online days or whatnot, we're able to offer both a morning and evening sort of, interactive time there where kids on either schedule would be able to find that time.
And our goal would be that the student would have a device, and if there was an issue with internet, you know, we were going to the best of our ability, we're going to provide opportunities for our students to have internet access, those that are remote. So, you know, that would be able to be transported with a child to the daycare setting as well.
We've got mobile hotspots that we purchased last spring, but one of the things I forgot to mention at the SCF meeting the other night was that they're partnering with the public library to submit a grant to purchase more. That would be kind of supervised by the library, but placed in our schools, so that they would be available to our students. So additional hotspots, which could be loaned out to students and their families and their household, but could also be loaned to, you know, child care centers if
I understand, and not to underestimate what a first or second grader might be capable of, but understand those daycare providers may also be serving students from a variety of districts, and so to expect them to be able to provide their regular daycare responsibilities as well as helping a half dozen or dozen kids log on to separate platforms and get their work done according to various schedules might be asking a lot. So I would just encourage you to think about that flexibility. The second, regarding online resources and what sort of tools we implement when you talk about online education, I know working through the spring, and I think I brought this up at a board meeting at some point over the summer, I know working with my own kids, we were kind of overwhelmed by the sheer number of logins and different tools and platforms that teachers were using to deliver content. And, you know, as 10 minutes before, and I got to install Zoom because they're using Zoom instead of Google Hangouts, or they're using Skype, or you know, to the best of our ability, providing a common set of tools that all grade levels will use when possible, just to make it easier, not only on the technology standpoint with the kids, but also on the parents who have to help facilitate that, so that they aren't having to, you know, create and remember 24 different logins across, you know, a bunch of.
That's something we've been working hard on. I apologize that I can't see you, Eric.
That's fine.
I can kind of, I think I'm tall, I can kind of see what's off the table. That is something we've been working very hard on since last spring, to kind of streamline that so that there's just more cohesion just for kids and for teachers. I spoke with actually Roxanne today. We're also going to create a document that is going to be a list for teachers, so they know what resources we have in the district. So I'm patterning it after a colleague of mine in another district that really, it's a chart that says, I want to, and then whatever it is, right? I want to record a video. And then in the next box, they'll have all the resources that we have in the district that help us to do that. And the purpose of identifying those tools for teachers is to help us, A, streamline, so that everybody knows what's available to us in the district, eliminate any redundancies, and identify any gaps, so that we can, if there are things that, tools that teachers or students need that we don't currently have, if we have kind of that go-to resources, instructional technology resources tools list, we can identify where we have, kind of streamline any of those redundancies, and identify gaps in resources so we can get those filled to support our kids and our teachers. So actually Roxanne was going to start working on that today, so she and I actually just talked about that about 2 o'clock today.
All right, great. And then the last item I'll kind of leave with is a much bigger outside of the box, so to speak, thought, which is, I know some school districts have focused on more of the online type curriculum for the older students that might be more capable of you know, managing their time efficiently, working effectively from a remote location, and trying to focus the in-person education on those, let's say, K through 6 students that can't reasonably be left at home. You've got 60% of households with dual income workers. You know, has there been any thought, and maybe we can't accomplish it in the first 9-week period, but maybe the second or third 9-week period we're able to roll out something like that, depending on maybe what the MAP testing comes back that says, hey, these kids aren't getting enough in-time instruction. Is there a way that we can be flexible to get more of those younger kids in and getting, you know, the hands-on instruction, and maybe helping the older learners access, you know, more online resources?
You know, at this point, it really is to have all of our kids in the buildings, to identify where any learning losses are for any of our kids before making any decision about really who should be in or out more or less. But that goes back to the nimble word, and again, I would tell you that nothing is ruled in or ruled out, although that's not a plan that we have in place now. I would tell you right now that whatever plan we share with you now is based on the information we have at this time. And if we learned anything in the spring, is that we learned that we needed to be flexible, to be consistent but not be rigid. And as we identified areas that we needed to change, you may have noticed the choice boards, for example, over the spring changed dramatically from the beginning to the end as we learned more about what our kids and teachers needed and how to make that better. And I would anticipate that whatever we implement this school year will be that same thing. We will continue to refine it and make the changes that we need to make as we go, based on the information we have as we get it, so that we can provide the very best possible experience for our students, while still keeping our teachers and our students safe.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for withstanding that onslaught.
I always appreciate your questions. I always say to people, you can ask that. I always appreciate when the board asks questions, because it always shows how involved you are. So I feel grateful for the questions and for your involvement. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Next item then is amending the district calendar.
So we'll ask the board to approve an amended calendar for a couple of reasons. First of all, a law was passed in the spring, which you all know about probably, that November 3rd was identified as a holiday, no student attendance, no waivers will be allowed for that. So we had to amend the calendar to adjust for that. No school on Tuesday, November 3rd. Last day of school for students will be Friday, May 28th. There will be a Teacher Institute on Tuesday, June 1st. There will also be a Teachers Institute on August 14th. That's to provide professional development opportunities for staff as well. So we'll be seeking the board's approval of the amended calendar tonight. Any questions about that?
Is there a motion to approve the amended calendar as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Roll call?
Jacobson?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yep.
Wren?
Yes.
Shiloh?
Yes.
Davy?
Yep.
Dunbeck?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Well, another night of welcoming. I should have welcomed you earlier, Nick. I'm sorry. When I was welcoming the superintendent, I should have welcomed you to the table as our new assistant superintendent. So,
Thank you.
so welcome. And the floor is now yours to talk to us about the high school and South Prairie Elementary School resurfacing bids.
You get me tonight, Jim.
Oh, okay.
Wrong assistant.
But you can welcome.
Oh, I thought that Nick was going to present this.
No, you can welcome me back too, because I left in March, and then I don't know what happened after that.
And you are? Yes, welcome back, Nicole. We're glad to have you with us.
So if you guys can remember, back in February when we talked budget for this upcoming school year, Mark presented to you some projects that needed to be done over the summer, and some of those were some resurfacing that needed to be done at the high school, as well as the South Prairie driveway. So we had a bid opening last Friday, and so you can see in front of you, Ralph, if you can, well, we'll do some pictures first. Just a reminder of, can you go back? The high school teacher parking lot, and then the north lot here at the high school. And then if you go to the next one, the driveway at South Prairie is pretty beat up. So we put that out to bid, and we had 6 bidders, which I was very pleased with. And as you can see, the lowest bidder was Curran Contracting. So their total cost is just shy of $200,000. We had a budget for these 3 projects of $275,000, so it came in way under budget. Which is good, because I'm sure we'll be able to find some other places to use that money. So tonight I would just ask the board to approve then Curran Contracting, and we'll get them in here as soon as possible to get working on those 3 spaces.
So is there a motion to approve awarding the bid to Curran Contracting to resurface the high school and South Prairie Elementary School lot and drive respectively?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded?
Is that Jones and Jacobson?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you get it?
Got it. Good.
Any discussion? I think that's a great bid price.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, roll call.
Jones?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yep.
Rin?
Yes.
Shiloh?
Yes.
Davy? Yep. Jacobson?
Yes.
Dombeck?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Is there a motion to go, open discussion and future agenda items first?
I just wanted to mention, I liked how the board meeting tonight was advertised to the general public. I thought it was, I don't know if that's a part of the new website that you referred to, Steve, or what that was, but it just seemed like it was really well communicated, and I just hope moving forward that we can to continue to over-communicate with our stakeholders, just whether through social media, whatever means that we can do to just keep everyone informed, it's all good. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. I worked with David Olson on doing that, so, and obviously there was a lot of interest in tonight's meeting, but that's a good idea to do that every meeting moving forward. I'll work with David to do that.
Yeah, good.
Any other discussion issues, observations, questions? Future agenda items? All right, then, is there a motion to go into executive session for the consideration of matters related to the appointment, employment, discipline, or dismissal of personnel in imminent litigation?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call?
Nelson?
Yep.
Rin?
Yes.
Shiloh?
Yes.
Davy?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Dombeck?
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, we'll go into executive session, and then we'll return for a final vote.
So, did we decide where we're going?
I don't know.
I think we're gonna see up.
I think the welder look is good for you. Yeah, it's good for you.
It's not real comfortable, I can tell you that.
Okay, well, is there a motion to approve the personnel report as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call?
Shiloh?
Yes.
Davy?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Rennie?
Yes.
Dombeck?
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much. This was a long and arduous meeting, and thanks for the comments and the careful consideration that everybody brought to the table today. I think we did well.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.